My wife and I were driving in the car. We were just going up a road not far from our house called Park Street. It's a four-lane divided road, so 2 in each direction, 30 miles an hour. Not a big deal. It's a major road, but it's not fast or anything. And it was a Saturday, so it wasn't terribly busy. We had turned the corner. We were heading north, and on the southbound side, filling the entire 2 lanes was about 100, 150 bicyclists, and they were all, as we say in America, butt naked. You can imagine how startling this was. I'm not used to seeing naked people on bicycles in a group outside in public. This is a set of kind of incongruous visual experiences. My brain couldn't process it. I actually forgot to drive because I was like, what's going on? I mean, it actually took me a minute to see 150 naked people and go, what? They're naked, to do that in my head. I forgot to drive. I think my foot came off the gas and I was suddenly unaware of the cars around me. And fortunately, I was slowing down. I think the same thing happened to the driver in front of me and apparently a driver behind me because nobody ran into me at that moment. My wife also was like, and she had this thought in her head, I should take a picture and post it on Facebook. The problem was she had her phone in her hand and she couldn't remember how to use her phone. Literally in that moment, she couldn't remember how to use her phone. And then we'd gone too far and they'd gone the other way and there was no possibility to get a picture. Now here's one of the things that I hear in martial arts a lot is people who say, well, I would adjust, right? So they hear a story about a self-defense scenario or a situation that's come up and they say, I would adjust. And, I live in America and the United States has a lot of people with guns and a lot of places where you can get a permit to carry a gun. Some places where you can carry a gun without a permit as long as it's not concealed, so people will literally walk around carrying guns. And a lot of places where you can get a concealed permit. And so when there's a terrible event, we recently had yet another mass shooting, there's always someone who says, well, if I'd been there and I'd had a gun, I would adjust. Well, here's the thing. For most people, if they'd been there and they'd had a gun, they would have tried to reach for their gun and they would have found that their hand wouldn't work. They wouldn't actually be able to pull their gun out of their holster. And the reason is that when you're in a kind of life-threatening situation, your heart rate rises, your blood pressure rises, and you start to hit this red zone. The minute you get above like 155 beats per minute, which can happen really fast, you can't really do anything anymore. And that's a high-stress scenario. Now think about me just driving the car. When I saw this group of bicyclists, my heart rate didn't increase. I didn't have any kind of stress response. I was just confronted by such a novel and unexpected experience that I was no longer able to process information. The first time you see something, your brain literally has to pull everything together just to figure out what's happening. So if I couldn't even drive and my wife couldn't even take a picture with the phone that was in her hand, what if that had been somebody whipping out a gun and shooting? I've never been in a firefight. I've never been in a situation where people are trying to kill people. How long would it have taken my brain to process what was happening and to respond? And if during that time of processing and response, I'd had my blood pressure rise, my heart rate rise, so that by the time my brain figured out what the situation I was in, my heart rate was now too fast for me to function, then I would have been what we say paralyzed by fear, unable to do anything. All of my great techniques would go out the window. And so, to me, there's a couple of lessons behind that. Lesson number one, never say, well, I would adjust, because unless you're actually in the scenario, you don't know what you would have just done. You maybe would have stood there and peed your pants and accomplished nothing. You may have been armed to the teeth with a gun and a knife and a pair of nunchaku in your back, and you couldn't even get them out. Or maybe tried to get it out and fumbled and dropped the gun and found yourself being killed. So don't say, I would have just done this or I would have just done that. Here's the second lesson. The second lesson is this. We have to train ourselves in a way that exposes us to stress, that exposes us to the energy of an attack. And there's a really simple way to start this. It's armor, Bogu Keiko, which means armor training. Armor. You put on armor and you start to train with armor. And what will happen is, because you're wearing headgear, your partner, they actually now try to hit you in the head. And you're no longer doing it off a punch that's going to stop here or is designed not to hit you. They're actually, your buddy is trying to smack you in the head because you've got armor on. And now that attack has intention, it has reality behind it. And the result is your blood pressure rises, your adrenaline goes up, your stress increases. Good armor gives you tunnel vision, which is actually one of the things that happens when you start to hit that red line of 155 or so beats per minute. You start to get tunnel vision. Your hearing is screwed up. Well, guess what? In the armor, your hearing is screwed up. So all of it, you start to feel, if you're wearing lots of armor, especially if we go ahead and put big gloves on and armor on your arms as well as your torso and head, your limbs don't work as well. They start to feel cottony the way it does in real life. I mean, we start to simulate the experience of being under intense stress. And you do that just with your regular, what people call one-steps, or your self-defense technique. You know, your attacker grabs you and punches you in the head, and it's real, and you have to defend against that. Even if that's done to account by the teacher, it still elevates stress, elevates your responses on so many levels. And the result then of doing that is you begin to become acclimated to stress, immune to it. We actually call it, sometimes these are called stress inoculation drills. So armor training is just one of many really effective ways to accomplish this. And there are lots of other drills that don't involve armor. If you don't have it or can't afford it, find them, begin to practice them. Expose yourself to the kind of stress that causes you to become anxious, a little afraid, a little insecure, your blood pressure to rise. Go ahead and do that. Do the kinds of things that will make it more likely that if you suddenly run into one of those novel and unexpected circumstances, that you actually can respond. And then know this, that until you're actually in a situation, until somebody actually does it to you, you don't know what you would do. You find out in that moment. It's unfortunate that that's how we have to find out, but you will find out in that moment. So you can't blame yourself if your brain just stops and you can't process it and you do nothing. It doesn't mean that you're not a good person, and it doesn't mean you're not brave. It means your brain was too busy going, I don't understand what's going on here. I'm Chris Thomas, and these are some reflections from the master class. Thanks for watching, and now, go train.